And we're back. Before the break, we started looking at writing tests for the SparkPost API SDK that I worked on a couple of weeks ago. And we got to the point where we had just successfully created a mock or a fake object that we can intercept and change the behavior of. So let's see what else this can do. We know that there are some extra mock methods happening and that it's not an actual instance of the client class, but like a fake representation of it. Let's check out what this actually means to us. Mock should receive. Let's intercept a method call and return something that we wanted to return. So should receive create transmission and return foo. Now when we call mock create transmission, we should receive foo. Funny that. There we go. Foo. We can do more interesting things with this. We can say, for instance, should receive with, let's see, foo bar, and return this. So when we do that, we should see baz. Fine. But when we return anything else, when we call it with anything else, we should get a failure because this expects to be called with an array. In fact, if we call it with an array of the wrong value, we should also get an error because we haven't said what it should return with this input. We've just said for the input of foo bar. So you can start to see how you can structure the stuff to be more interesting, to return exactly what you need it to return, so that you can really isolate all of the variables out of the test that you're doing. We're not trying to test the client here, we're trying to test the transmission proxy. So anyway, how do we do something more interesting with this? We can say proxy is new transmission proxy, and we can give the mock here. And if this wasn't an instance or a subclass of client class, this wouldn't work, would it? Now we can make PHP Storm try and believe that this is an instance of the client class, and so this will go away. This inspection will go away. But if this wasn't a subclass of client, if it didn't implement the same structure as client, this would give us an error because we're type hinting client. Does it give us an error? Nope, just works. Now how do we test that this is working? Let's have a look what our proxy class does. We call a create method on it with an array of options, and that expects some stuff. And then we call the create transmission with that array of stuff on it. Now we need to test a few things. We know we're only sending 4 items in here. So let's write a test that sends these 4 items in here. And let's check that this array that's sent here matches this format that we're doing here. In fact, I'm going to copy this structure out here. And I'm going to say that this is what we expect. This is what we expect to call client with. Expect to, let me rename it to something better. Expect to send to client. And it is this. Data to send mock. We want to account for these properties because they're the ones that our implementation is using. And generally you wouldn't do this way around. You would say the public behavior I expect of my implementation is X, and then you would create the implementation to match that. But since we've made the implementation already, we're just going to test for the things we know that work with it. And then we can modify that a little bit. So recipients, let's just call this everybody. We're not really interested in the format of this because, as I said, SparkPost is going to validate this anyway. HTML, the message, from is somebody, again, we don't care about the validation, and the subject is the subject. Sweet, okay. Now, instead of these options things, we're going to use the data that we send to the mock. And then what we're going to say is our mock should receive I'm going to have to do a mock interface here as well, because it's both types, really. Should receive create transmission with what we expect to send to client. That's actually all we need is an assertion. Now, we don't actually need this inspection, so I'm going to disable it. Mockery is going to give you an inspection to say should receive, doesn't have any arguments in its signature, but you're giving it arguments. And to that I'd say yes, because it's probably inspecting the func get args response to see what arguments are there. It's a dynamic method signature. So we don't have to worry about that inspection. It's kind of annoying, and I always end up disabling it anyway. But here we can say new transmission with mock. Proxy create with the data we send to the mock. I'm actually going to rename this as well. Let's see, can I do it like this? How do I rename this? Do I have to run a different refactor thing? Let's see. Rename. Wow, there is no hotkey for that. Okay, rename. I'm going to rename this data for client. And this expect to send to client, I'm also going to rename to data client gets. Oh, I hate these names. I hate these names. This is supposed to be the stuff that we send to the proxy down here. And this is supposed to be what the proxy sends to the client. I can't think of appropriate names for that at the moment. But you get the point though. Now, what this is going to tell us is that if we send a different structure to the client, that our transformation stuff isn't working. But let's run this and see if it passes. Okay, it doesn't fail. It doesn't fail. What if we change this slightly? What if you said instead of contents, send contents? It says no matching handler found. Because what it expects is this array. And what the proxy sends is this array. This isn't so much a test about if precondition, then, if precondition, when event, then postcondition. This is a test all about the mock expects these parameters and this method call. And if it doesn't get that, throw an exception. But if it does, that's fine. You don't actually have to make any assertions, which is great. It's an interesting way to test, I think. This is essentially a functioning test for the transmission proxy. So let's make a commit. Do I have a git repo on this? Git push. Where did that actually send to? Git remote VB. Oh, okay. I had a repo for it. Cool. So here's a test for this. And we can run this 1,000 times and just be happy that it works. I'm going to run it another time. Yay! Now, because we have, let me just check if I actually have this. Brew install PHP 5.6 xdebug. I don't think I have it installed, so I'm glad I checked. There we go. I didn't have it installed. If you have xdebug installed, and by the way, I'm using Homebrew, which is a package manager for Mac, then you can run PHP unit, but with a coverage flag, coverage HTML, coverage. And this will generate some code coverage data in the coverage folder, whatever you put after coverage-html. So I can open coverage index. Wow, wow, wee, wow. And here we see, okay, I'm testing all the code that this class has, which is not very much code. But I'm testing 100% of functions and 100% of lines of code. I'm not testing, you'll notice, anything from client. Even though I haven't told PHP unit specifically I'm not wanting to test this. Because I use a mock, none of this code actually runs. It's not calling the original create transmission function. And Xdebug can see that when we run the tests. And so Xdebug knows we haven't actually tested this code. We have tested a mock, which isn't really testing. But we haven't tested this client class. We've just run functions against it according to mock stuff that we've done. I want to add coverage to getIgnore. Let's see. There we go. Vendor, coverage. Let me sort this alphabetically because why not? And there we go. We have our first test. Incidentally, it tests all the code that we need to send a mail. Not really. It just tests the transmission proxy. Wow, this is taking long. Don't take so long. Okay, we're testing all of this code. That's fine. And we can expand these options and expand the unit tests for them. No problems. Now, let's make a test for the client. Okay, let's put it up here. No, what am I doing? Sometimes I drag things accidentally. Client PHP. Okay. This is the same namespace as the abstract test class, so I'm going to just borrow that. Class client test extends test. Okay, and I've named this the wrong thing. Client test. Okay, public function, it creates transmissions. We have to do an annotation here because I don't want to prefix my function with test. So I'll do it with an annotation because why not? Because why not? Okay. It creates transmissions. Now, what do we expect to happen here? Well, we want to create a new client instance. And we want to give it a Guzzle HTTP client. Do we? No. No, we don't. Use client as Guzzle client. Let's import this and name it Guzzle client, and let's create a mock for it. Mockery mock, and this is Guzzle client class. And let's import the mockery class as well. Let's do that, and let's just give a fake API key, ABC 123, because we're not going to call against the actual API. To help PHP storm along, we can say this is a mock interface or a Guzzle. Oh, what did I do? Or a Guzzle client. And so we don't get this error anymore. Let's just see if we can create an instance of this. If we run our tests, I'll keep running coverage on it. Here, we've got 2 tests and no errors, which means this mock must look to the client class as if it was a Guzzle client, which is what we want. We don't want to create an actual Guzzle client instance. So let's assign this to a variable. And then what else do we want to do? Let's see what our client class does. We have some get stuff. So maybe let's carry on with this test in a little bit. No. I'll finish this test first. We're not interested in testing private methods because we just want to test the public behavior of our implementation. But what we do want to test is that the options array has slightly modified. Though we don't want to test the private properties of this, we want to know that request is actually being called on the client. Do we? I don't know. What's the appropriate thing to test here? What do you think? Tell me in chat. What do you think is the appropriate thing to test here? I don't want to test the private request function at all. So what should I be testing? Do you know? Ask in chat. Anybody? Okay. I don't think I want to test the... I don't think I want to test that request is being called. What I do want to do is try and... I do want to try and see whether a body is called. Oh, I do have to do this. I do have to do this. Okay. I don't usually want to test private methods, but in this case, I need to see that Guzzle is being called with the correct data. Specifically, that the authorization header is being set. So I'll do it like this. Mark, let's see, get... What are the things I have on here? Can I get the header here? No. Okay. How is this being called? It's being called with a method which will be post or get or whatever SparkPost API does. It'll be called with a base and an endpoint, which I'll have to work out in the test. And it'll be called with an array of stuff. Okay, so let's see. I'll say mock should receive request with post mockery type string for the endpoint that it gets called, and mockery type, and I'll say an array. And return expected result. Why I'm returning will become apparent in a little bit. The array that I want to get here needs to involve this stuff. Send to Guzzle client is this. And here I want to say, I wonder if this works. I haven't actually tried this aspect of things yet. But this I actually want to be ABC123. That's the key that I want to see set as the authorization, because that's what I create this class instance with. I don't really care what the body is so long as it's a string. So, should send a post request. In fact, I'll change this to string as well. And I'll explain why in a little bit. But the mockery client, the Guzzle client mock, should receive a request method call. It should receive 3 parameters. So in the first case, it should receive a string, which will be the HTTP request method. I don't want to specify whether that's patch or post or put or delete or head or whatever, because maybe the API specifics of SparkPost do change, and then the one I specify is incorrect, and I'll have brittle tests, and I'll have to come change the tests when the implementation changes. But if I say it expects a string, that can be get or post, that's fine, that's all right. Then the second parameter also expects a string, and this needs to be a URL. But again, I don't want to specify the specifics of the URL, because if the API changes, I want to change the implementation, the tests must still work. So as long as the first 2 parameters are a string, that's fine. Then the third parameter, let's have a look at the implementation, is actually an array of specifics about the request. So as long as I check that the headers are correctly set, which means has the correct content type, has the correct authorization key, which matches what I declare the class with, then this is fine. And the body can be literally anything, because I know it's going to be a JSON encoded string. Now, I hope these parameter types work because I've never tried this deep nesting of mockery type yet. But let's see. Client, create transmission. I don't need to specify an array to begin with. Does this work? No, it doesn't. No matching handler found. Because it's literally going to take the string. So mockery type nested like that doesn't actually work. Oh wait, mockery type nested doesn't work like that. No, what are you doing? Why are you stalling? Don't stall. Maybe I just need to try the actual JSON string that gets sent. Let's try that. Call to member function getBody on string. Oh, that's right. Okay, so the response that I get back from this actually shouldn't be expected result because I still call the getBody method on this, expecting it to be a Guzzle client object. I should actually just return mock from this and then say mock should receive getBody, and return expected. Does that work? Okay, I don't get any errors now. But can I say this assert equals? Why am I not getting? Okay, I was getting suggest on there. Now I'm specifically checking that what this returns is what I get back here when I call client create transmission. And a failure. Why? JSON decode. Oh, pants. Would that work? Do I have to quote it like that? No. Okay, I'll have to actually construct a JSON string here. So I'll say foo bar. And what I expect back from here is an array of foo bar. Just checking this before I explain it. Yes, okay, that works. Right, so the client class is going to try and run this through JSON decode. It's not enough that I return a string from client request. I have to return something that has a getBody method. So I return the mock itself and I make the mock expect a getBody method. So this saves me having to make a second mock just for that getBody method. But then the client's also going to run it through JSON decode. So I probably have to make sure that this is a valid JSON object for it to decode. And that's what I have here. And so the PHP representation of JSON underscore encode on the string renders an array, which is fine. So when I run it, it doesn't have any errors. If I go back to the source code coverage, I'm covering most of this stuff. I test that I can create an instance of it. I test that I can send a create transmission request, that this line gets called. I'm totally in the wrong class. No, I'm not. I'm in the right class. Okay, I test that I can run this method. I do not test that the request method exists in my unit test because I don't really need to know about it, but I do need to make sure that at least Guzzle is being called correctly. So I test that by checking that it's called with a string here, and an array here. And then I have to do some juggling just to make sure that getBody works, to make sure that JSON decode will return an object, and overall we check that this whole thing works. But I'm still not checking that I can create a transmission proxy class instance. Before I do that, I'm going to take another break. So hang out for a little bit and I will see you in just 2 minutes.